My name's Tod Seelie. I'm a Brooklyn-based photographer, and I recently collected and published a book of basically 15 years in New York City titled Bright Nights, Photographs of Another New York. I'm going to be running a slideshow behind me of a sample of the images from the book. At the end, I'm going to do a Q&A, but if you see a photo go by and you want to hear the story behind it, try to remember which one it is so you can ask me. I'm going to get started. So it's hard to summarize close to 170 photos and 15 years of your life into a few categories, but to give you a better sense of the book, I'm going to try. There's a lot of DIY shows, basement punk shows. There are mutant bicycle gangs and festivals that they throw. There's a lot of weird parties of various sorts. There's intimate portraits of my friends, random New York City street scenes, and abandoned spaces and parties that we sometimes throw in them. So along with the photos in the book, I asked people who were pivotal characters in what was going on to write an essay about what it was like in New York City during this time. Some of the contributors are the artist Swoon, Ian Vanek of the band Japanther, Colin Moynihan from the New York Times, and Jeff Stark, who helped organize a lot of events that appear in the book and also has run the Nonsense NYC event listings email for over 10 years. When I first moved to New York City, I met a lot of the people that I still collaborate with. The artist Swoon was an energetic girl from Florida with big ideas. Ian of Japanther answered a flyer I put up looking for a new roommate. I encountered the art collectives Madagascar Institute and Dark Passage, who were a bit older and an inspiration for our early projects. Eventually, some of the people I knew through various channels joined a bicycle club and threw their first party called Bike Kill, which has been going on for over 10 years now. It was definitely a bit of luck being in the right place at the right time and forming relationships that would continue to be extremely influential for the years to come. When I first arrived in New York City, I didn't take many photographs. My aesthetic and subject matter were heavily oriented to where I was coming from in the Midwestern-looking Rust Belt. Empty parking lots, aluminum siding, and vacant lawns were not the dominant landscape in Brooklyn. At first, that prompted me to focus on getting out of New York City and traveling as much as I could, since I felt that was a requirement for making work. I also did not have a very positive introduction to New York City. It was dangerous, expensive, difficult to do simple things like bring your groceries home in the snow, and every once in a while you got robbed. After about 4 years there, I turned a corner and finally began to find my footing in the city, and that's when I really started to train my camera on the place where I lived. I don't work like a traditional photojournalist, selecting a project, shooting it for a month or a week, and then considering it finished and moving on. I'm shooting my life, where I end up, who I'm with, and what we're up to. I've essentially been working on two approaches to the where and when I've ended up in for 15 years. Bright Nights is a slice of one approach. It's a city-specific take on a larger body I tend to call everyday. The work is often rooted in traditions of documentary and street photography, as it's responding to what's naturally occurring around me. The other body of work still shows the influence of my upbringing, comprised of heavily considered man versus nature landscapes, night photographs, and very stoic portraits. This work is usually shot with a square format camera, and it has a natural tendency to slow things down. One thing that I aim for in any photo I take is an element of narrative. With everyday work, I find this tends to be more overt, as there's often action or event playing out, and there are often people who act as characters in the images. A strong sense of narrative has always been a hallmark of great photography for me, not only in what I'm attracted to, but also in what seems to stand the test of time. When I think of the photographers who were huge influences on me, William Eggleston, Lee Friedlander, Robert Frank, and Joel Sternfeld, these are not photographers who did small, easily digestible themed projects. These photographers were focused on whatever attracted their eye and created their own worlds by how the various pieces slowly formed together and informed each other. Probably the greatest influence for me while envisioning this book was The Ballad of Sexual Dependency by Nan Goldin. It was published in 1986, and it's a very personal record of her life and relationships in New York City. Her photos are an excellent example of a strong implied narrative, and in her case, they were combined with amazingly intense emotion and tension. There was also the obvious correlation of the fact that we were both showing photographs of our friends and our lives over a certain period of time in New York City, although in very different ways. One of the most common questions I get is, how did you end up there and get that shot? And part of that answer is to be more than a photographer. As I've mentioned, I'm usually photographing what I'm up to, and part of that is to be up to interesting things. A lot of my friends I met when I first moved to New York City still frequently band together to help each other pull off larger projects more than one or two people could. I've always tried to be a contributing participant as much as a documenter. Whether it's building and crewing junk rafts, scheming and working behind the scenes on events in abandoned spaces, or just working as a roadie with a touring band, I've always felt it's important to be a contributor to the greater goal in addition to a documenter. One downside to that is I often miss great shots because I'm busy driving or managing a raft or scouting ahead. but I consider that an acceptable price to pay in the grand scheme of things. The world is not happening just for your personal photo opportunities, even though it will deliver some amazing moments if you're watching for them. Another answer of how I got that shot is I always have a camera with me. There's a famous phrase, what's the best camera? The one you have with you. And I do believe that's true. There's a good sampling of images like this one in the book that exists because I happened to have a crappy point and shoot in my pocket at the time. In this case, I was on the way to get groceries. I think this is particularly true in a city like New York City. One aspect that keeps me so interested in that city and always coming back is that there are so many different layers and worlds there. The images in Bright Nights show a slice of a less well-known New York City, but there are thousands of others out there rubbing elbows with each other every day. When I'm shooting, my goal is to try and make the photograph seem as much like it was to be there as possible. If there's a throbbing crowd and things flying through the air and explosions, I want the photo to feel like that too. For me, an important aspect of trying to capture the environment accurately is that I don't digitally manipulate my images more than you could in a traditional darkroom, things like brightness or contrast, unless it's for a job that requires it. I always try to work in the realm of naturally occurring reality and yet show that reality as amazing as it is. I often get asked the somewhat awkward question of what I'm trying to say with my photographs. And I feel less like I'm trying to make a narrow declarative statement and more that I hope to inspire people to be ambitious with what they want to do. There's a shared pivotal moment in a lot of people's lives I know, and they're all variations on a similar moment I experienced. For me, it was that first punk show I went to, where you saw a whole culture of people doing what they want on their own, with no fear of limitations and not waiting for permission. And I just lost my place. It's that moment when you realize that the world and your options are so much bigger than you thought, that you don't have to follow the predetermined paths laid out by example around you. On a certain level, I hope my photographs and what they depict can also be helpful in opening up other people's ideas of what their own options are too. When I first moved to New York City, it was a lot more dangerous. However, there was a lot more freedom. The waterfront in Williamsburg was full of vacant lots right on the water. People had band practice there and bonfires, and no one cared. Now that same area is a manicured state park where they won't let you take a photograph without a permit. And as with any significant change, there are pros and cons. The edges of the waterfront park are squeezed between towering condo high-rises. However, you don't have to be looking over your shoulder all the time while you're walking around. Just because the wild waterfront is gone doesn't mean people have stopped having parties in neglected spaces. You do have to look harder and risk more to keep doing it though. A lot of the photos in the book were shot very recently. I would find myself editing the book during the day and going out at night to shoot more. So it's not to say these things aren't happening anymore, but it would be a huge stretch to say that life in the city hasn't changed drastically as well. Patti Smith recently said that artists should leave New York, that the city's crushing rents and gentrification are too hostile an environment for creating art. And while there's a huge amount of truth to that, a lot of the people I know aren't ready to give up yet. We continue to form and reform all kinds of communities for special projects that make living in New York worthwhile for us, and hopefully for other people as well. One of the projects that I was working on, collaborating with my friends while I was editing the book, was the idea to set up a speakeasy in an abandoned water tower in Manhattan and try to run it for 6 weeks without getting caught. And we actually pulled it off. It was called the Night Heron. It took months of scouting to find an abandoned water tower that would actually work. But besides the logistics of gaining access, creating a way that we could bring guests in, and figuring out how to get in all the parts of pianos that we were going to build the furniture out of, was figuring out how do you run an event in an abandoned space for more than one night? Because most of the other events we do, it's just in, party, out, and as long as you got out, you're good. But this one was repeated. And so one thing we had to do, besides having everyone not talk about it, not Instagram it, not blog it, was figuring out how to invite people. Because we don't always want to do the events just for our friends, especially when it's going to run for such a long time. What we ended up doing was having a starter cell of people we trusted and giving them each a pocket watch. On the inside, it had directions on how to kind of cash in your reservation and just let that go. So the next group of people that came were mostly strangers, and those people were given the option of purchasing a pocket watch because the whole entire experience was free. The booze, the whole thing. But it cost us money. So the idea was by selling invites that were then gifted, we let it loose in a sort of 6 degrees of separation kind of way. And that made it interesting for the people running the event to see who showed up, because you had no idea. And surprisingly, over 6 weeks, we didn't have any trouble. We didn't get caught. A bunch of celebrities ended up showing up at the end, which was kind of fun. And then just one night, closed the hatch, left the bar totally intact, and went away because we weren't in jail yet. So that was a win. But I have other stories for all these photos, but I'd like to open up to Q&A in case there's any in particular you guys want to know about. or I could start with this one. I was invited to a basement, just like a basement hip hop party in Harlem by a friend of mine who was working with a rapper. And I was told it was okay to bring my camera and I'd be like protected while I was there, which turned out to be quite literally important. But so I get there and there's no light in the entire basement of this building except from the hallway. So once you're in the room, it's just shapes moving. You can barely see your hand in front of your face. And at one point I was just kind of standing there figuring out what to do, and someone taps me on my shoulder and I turn around and I can barely make out that there's someone in front of me. So I'm just kind of waiting because they're not saying anything. And eventually I realized they're kind of just waiting for me to take their photo. So I just pop my flash, look at the back of the camera and realize he's holding up $53. Yeah, that was just one of those weird moments of, there's another shot in the book of the dancing that was the main reason for the party, or dry humping. But yeah, that was one of those experiences where just living in the city, someone extends an invitation, you end up in a place you never would have ended up otherwise, and you have quite an experience. But yeah.
Does it often come through invitation, or is it like candid, or what's the relationship with like asking permission with photography in the RV?
Well, as far as like where I end up, usually it's with people I know. This is a rare occurrence where someone's like, someone should be taking photos of these parties. Yeah. I can get you in. But that's really rare. On occasion, I do get assignments that take me places, but for the most part, it's just wherever. Like this shot is because I used to ride critical mass every single month, and then the police started arresting everyone and confiscating their bikes, so you just happen to be there because you're trying not to get arrested. So a lot of it comes from that, but every so often in a city like New York, there's so much going on, and if you say yes, most of the time, you're going to end up in some fun places. Yeah?
How many times have you been arrested?
I've been arrested once. Only once, and not in New York City. Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
What for?
Well, trespassing for taking photographs, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned a mailing list
Yeah.
at the beginning. What was that? So it was all sort of one group that was getting together?
No, there's tons of different groups, and there's a lot of overlap, of course. The mailing list is probably 11 or 12 years old, and it was underground events. I mean, 10 years ago, the internet wasn't quite as flush as it is now anyway. So being able to get on this list that's just being like, hey, there's this weird party, there's this other thing. And there's definitely like, you can kind of like see the different scenes that are kind of there's definitely the Burning Man aspect and sort of a more intellectual, let's go talk about weird things and get drunk aspect. But it ended up being sort of an anchor for a lot of different groups to find new people. Because I mean, in the city, you can go there and find more or less any sort of group, like whatever you're looking for, but it can be really hard sometimes. So this made it a lot easier. And also like people were made aware of what other people were doing that they wouldn't have known about otherwise.
Were there any like core themes or philosophies behind it?
Not really, it was curated. So Jeff, who is the guy who runs it, like, he's not just gonna post something because your band's playing. Like it has to be worthy of the list and of his audience in his mind. So he definitely had standards. Yeah. Yeah.
Are these photos majority taken with the same lens, or is it a mix match of different devices and cameras and that?
It's definitely a mishmash, partially because it's over. I mean, the oldest photograph in the book is from 1998, so there wasn't really digital back then. There's a good chunk of film in the book. Some of it was from a really crappy point and shoot. Some was from my dad's old SLR he loaned me. But eventually, I got a nice digital camera, and so a lot of it's that as well.
What's your
No iPhone.
what's
Yeah.
your main go-to lens that you use for street shooting?
Well, if I'm going somewhere planning to shoot, I basically have a 24-70 2.8. That's my I mean, there's I've done a lot of other shooting and traveling outside of New York that's not in the book, but there were some shots of the rafts. And so in that case, you don't even have room for much luggage. You really have to pack down. So it's one body, one lens for a month. In that case, I take the 24-70. Some of the basement shows, I go the 16-35 because you're shooting someone who's right here. And that's the only way you're gonna get more than half their face. So, yeah. Yeah.
Where were those more real shots about 5 to 8 slides ago?
That was,
Jersey?
no, if it's New Jersey, it can't be in the book. It has to be the 5 boroughs. That was most likely Staten Island.
Okay.
I ended up doing a lot of post-Sandy recovery and coverage, and that took me out to what was probably Staten Island, where there's like half a house in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remarkable,
Yeah. So like there was a good chunk of Far Rockaway, Staten Island, Sandy disaster, and then there's a couple shots of the blackout in Manhattan as well. This is 9/11, actually.
So who's commissioning these photos, like for commercial geeks?
No, I mean, that sounds great, but yeah, I mean, the vast majority of this is just, this is where I am, I have a camera. I've been running a photo blog for, it'll be 10 years in September, and it definitely has, you know, gone in surges, but a lot of this, actually, some of this ended up on there. But yeah, it's just really just what I've been up to, what I've been taking photos of. Yeah.
So do you do commission stuff as well, like the editorials?
Yeah, I've been doing more photojournalism, more editorial lately. But yeah, I mean, for a long time I was an art handler. Like, that was my day job, or sometimes my weekend job. It was an art fair. Yeah, that was just like paying the bills so I could keep doing this. But when I decided to try and put out a book, you know, and pitch it, I decided to stop.
Personal work.
Well, yeah, I'm like, I can't keep art handling and still have the time to devote to like shopping a book around. So I put an end to it there. So, yeah. Yeah.
When you were at these like crazier parties, did you feel like you were more of a participant, or that you were like there with a specific purpose?
It varied, definitely. Like on the rafts, like I was driving or working on the engine. So like that one, photography was definitely secondary, but some of the, you know, parties in abandoned spaces or other things like that was my primary job. Like a lot of times I would be part of like the scouting crew and the prep crew, so I could be really familiar with the layout and have already kind of contributed, because during the event I was just gonna have to be shooting. Yeah, definitely, you know, it's case by case, yeah. And sometimes you just self-assign something so you can kind of do whatever you want.
What's the story with the rafts?
So the rafts, it's kind of a long story, but it was an idea by the artist Swoon that we initially took to the Mississippi River, and we traveled over 2 summers from Minneapolis to St. Louis. But it was a very like open-ended, like anyone could come and join the crew, or at least be tried out to join the crew. So it was a pretty open door. It was a more, you know, anarchist approach to organizing, consensus-based decision-making. There was no leaders, there was no boss. Later, she decided she wanted to basically make art that was rafts and create a raft trip out of, but like as her artwork. And that was the Swimming Cities, which is what appears in the book, because it was the only time the rafts were anywhere near New York City. We did a trip over a summer from Troy, New York, down to New York City. And the rafts were then docked as part of her solo show in Queens. They're actually on display right now in the Brooklyn Museum of Art. And the Hudson trip was in 2008. We eventually took those rafts to Europe and went from Slovenia to Venice and crashed the Biennale, which was really fun. But yeah, so and like now there are splinter groups, kind of like some of the old crew going on and doing other projects. There was a trip that went down the Ganges, although there's not a lot of documentation of it. And there's some friends of mine, we did a small trip on the Willamette in Oregon last year as a test run, and we're going back to do a much longer trip in August from Corvallis up to Portland. So, yeah. Cool. Yeah.
What do your subjects think of all the photos being in a book?
So if I knew someone and there was a photograph of them in a mildly questionable manner for whatever reason, I got in touch with them and said, hey, I'm putting out a book. I want to use this photo. Like, do we need to have a conversation about it? Like, and I think I can't really think of any exception. Everyone was just really excited that it was going to be in the book. So, I mean, some of the portraits I feel like are also like slightly obviously like X's. And so because of that, like we've already had these conversations. And it was more just like, you're going to be in the book. Is that cool? And then in some cases, I have no idea who the people were. And so there's nothing I can really do in that case. Especially over 15 years, it's, you know, when you're going back through your negatives, it's a long time ago. Yeah.
I have another question too that
Yeah.
you may not be able to answer, but I've always wondered why we have such a fascination with what happens in New York City.
That's a really good question. I mean, I definitely feel like you can blame television and movies at least a little bit. For me, the thing that really fascinated me the first time I visited was it was so dense and so fast. Everything is moving. Like, it's not just like, oh, there's just one busy part. It's like the entire city is moving. It's so dense. There's just so much going on. And I realized like I could walk down a street and just want to turn around and go right back because of all the stuff I missed. And I really got fascinated by that. So maybe that's partially why as well. I mean, it's a very distinct city. I have friends that move there and are just like, I cannot do this. Just going to the store stresses me out, you know, which not every city is like that. So maybe it's partially that. But, you know, there's definitely some legend to the city at this point. But, I mean, I also feel like that's partially why people are upset about the gentrification and the condos rising and replacing old neighborhoods. Is there's a, you know, people have this affinity for their idea of New York, and it's not a condo New York, or at least the people I know. And so I also feel like there's a bit of that. People have their own perceived idea of what the city is. And I feel like I don't know if you could ever like feel like you live there long enough to exhaust that idea. Like you're always going to be kind of drawn to it, even if you've been there for, what, 17 years now? So, yeah.
You know that moment when you're going to the grocery store and you just happen to be there when something was going down?
Yeah.
How close did you end up going to get that shot? And did you ever, I know that you're a guy and you probably don't fear things, but when you go up close, do you ever feel like someone's going to get angry at you and say, what are you doing with that camera? Like,
that happens all the time.
Do you get over it, or do you just take your chance every single time to
No.
get that moment, to get that shot?
There's never the same answer. Every time you have to evaluate differently.
You do, right?
Yes. Yeah. Is the shot worth it? How likely do I think I'm going to have an issue? And there's also the issue that I have where like I can't always ask permission because this moment, like that shot of those two people having a fight in the middle of the street, I can't go, hey guys, can you, excuse me, you know, like,
Exactly.
like
but
that.
you see the shot and
Right.
you want it,
Yeah.
so you go for it. So what happens in that moment when you
They have no idea I took that photo. They were really busy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other thing with that particular instance is like, I literally had just like cleared the corner of a building, saw what was happening, like, cause I heard some shouting, I look, and I pulled out my camera, got one shot off, and that moment was gone. Like the guy with the 2x4 was booking it down the street, cause there were more people coming, you know, like, and that's the sort of thing where like, that's the street photographer aspect, at least in my mind. It's just like, you see a moment, you catch it just before it's over. So in that case, like, I feel like there's not really a permission thing. It's more just like what happens next. But in other cases, I mean, sometimes if I see someone just kind of sitting in a quiet moment, then you have the opportunity to come up and be like, can I photograph you? But at the same time, you have to take into consideration, like they're probably gonna be looking at you after that. They might not really be receptive to you telling them to go look over here, and that's not really my style. Like if I ask to take your photo and you look at me, that's the photo.
So have you come across that? Obviously you have then. You see an intimate moment, nobody's around, and it's just the two, and you want that shot. But you know if you take that shot, they're gonna look at you. That moment of, do you take the shot, or it all depends, I guess.
It all totally depends. Yeah, I mean sometimes it's if I can take the shot and I'm not gonna intrude or bother them, like even if they notice, but they might just be like, whatever, you know. But there's other moments where I'm just like, this would be really obnoxious. I'm not gonna do it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean there's a constant struggle I have, at least, with like, at what point is the photographer too much of a nuisance? And it's definitely something that comes up mostly shooting live shows, where there's a lot of photographers who are very large nuisances, even to me. And so like, based on that experience, I've kind of always had to continually kind of refine my opinion as far as like what I'm willing to do with 500 people behind me. So I feel like that extends to other things as well. And a lot of times it's just evaluating like, is this going to be a major disruption? Is this going to be nothing? And deciding, you know, basically deciding based a lot on that. Yeah. So, yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Do you find that there's sort of a decline with the underground scene, with sort of the new condos in New York now?
I almost don't know if I can evaluate yet. And maybe I'm just lucky that my friends are still running around. I do have friends that have left the city. They're just like, this is bullshit. I'm done. It's too expensive. The police are there's a big problem. It's just not worth it. Like I want to be free, and I can't be free here anymore, which sounds really strange when I think about how I felt about it when I first moved there. But I also completely see their point. So I don't know if there's been a big drop, but a lot of places have lost their spaces and haven't been able to find new ones. There's a lot of venues that everyone kind of knows, the clock is ticking. As soon as they finish that condo, they're going to shut you down. So I feel like it's perhaps the wave is about to crest and things are about to really change, but right now we just see it looming. Literally, the condos are looming. So I'm not entirely sure, but it's changed drastically. I mean, in 2004, the NYPD really changed their approach to how they police, and they really started cracking down on any bike rides, activist stuff. They started really cracking down on house shows, all sorts of stuff, and it's been a very slow war, but they've won because they never stop. And so I feel like that's one of those things where it's given enough time, it'll filter out and affect a lot of other things. Whether or not there's a condo on your block isn't going to make you not want to do fun things, but it's part of a larger push, a larger change in the feeling of the city.
Changes the demographics.
Yeah, well, I mean, the demographics are changing because they're building housing for new people, not the people who were there before. I mean, on a certain level, New York City's always been like that, There used to be a giant Little Italy, now it's mostly Chinatown. There's a lot of things that are constantly shifting because New York City is a big target, or not target, but like a big attraction for immigrants because there's usually a community there. There's a lot of work. So neighborhoods are always going to shift because of that. But the thing that's different now is that, Park Slope has changed a lot since I moved there. And it's very, very, wealthy and white now. But the buildings are the same. So like, grandma can go show a grandchild where she grew up. But where the condos are going up, it's just like the entire neighborhood gets erased. Like there's no trace of it left. And so I feel like that's a slightly more violent way of changing the city than traditionally has been the way New York's worked. So, yeah. Yeah.
Where are they going to be free?
New Orleans, Detroit, Oakland, Portland, all the other cities that are also getting gentrified. Because it's not a New York City problem by any means. Yeah, it's just, other cities where it's cheaper and maybe not as intense. Yeah, but I don't know. It's something that I think about, but at the same time, I'm not attracted to those other cities like I'm attracted to New York City. So, yeah.
How does this all compare to Vancouver? I'm not from Vancouver. This is a question to like everybody, but like, there's a lot of condos here. I haven't found any abandoned buildings or a strong like underground scene or anything. So I'm trying to like figure this out. It's pretty new to me, like for anybody really. Like,
I don't know. I used to come here about 10 years ago. I knew a bunch of people, musicians and artists, and would just come and hang out. And there's a great community. And so I really haven't been back in about a decade, and there's a lot more condos.
Heaps of condos.
Yeah.
Like properties just seems like really just controlled here.
Yeah. Well, I have no idea about the Canadian economy or Vancouver, but in New York, or not, well, in New York, but in a lot of America, it's just, you've had a really strong economy for a long time. And that's going to have a big shift. I also feel like I have a theory that you have a generation of people that were raised in the suburbs by their parents who fled cities. And they don't want to live in the suburbs. Cities are cool. In all the TV shows and all the movies, everyone lives in the cities. All the interesting things are happening in the cities, which is true in real life as well as in television. So I feel like you just have a whole generation of people who want to live in the city. And that's why you have this huge surge in every city, not just New York. Because when the condos first started going crazy, it's like, what, is there like a lot of vacancies on the Upper East Side? But they're not. Like, these are all new people, and it's all the cities. So I feel like it could just be a generational shift. And it's basically because the cities are safer and the economy has been pretty good for a long time. In that regard, it's not going to change anytime soon. It's going to take another generation, maybe? I don't know. Or maybe not. So. Does anyone else have an opinion in Vancouver?
I could say that the way you describe New York sounds like Vancouver. Believing, going to other places where it's cheaper, thinking that it's going to be better, but then just shifting the gentrification somewhere else.
Yeah.
The artists are always the first ones into a community because they need to be somewhere cheaper. But then everybody sees the artist there and they go, oh, that's a great place to be. I want to be there too. And then people with money come in and they have to live somewhere. So condo buildings go up, and then it all starts again. Artists move somewhere else. Yeah, we hear it all the time here.
Yeah.
Do people like move to specific suburbs in Vancouver or neighborhoods? Or do they move to cities?
They tend to move out of Vancouver. If they're an artist in Vancouver, they tend to go Montreal or into the States, somewhere like Portland or LA,
right.
or San Francisco or something like that. But then it's not much cheaper down there. Portland's cheaper, I guess. But yeah, Montreal is a big place for artists to move to. But then, are there opportunities there for artists? There are, but other jobs, you want to make money. I don't know.
I have an unrelated question. Well, sort of related question. First of all, I'm curious about the photo of the angel in the shopping cart. And then related to what we were just talking about is whether or not you feel like you will ever leave New York, or if there's somewhere else that you might want to spend some time.
Sure. I'm going to go with the easy question first,
yeah.
which is the angel in the shopping cart. I mean, for me, that's one of the moments that I really enjoy, where I go to an event, no idea what's going to happen, and you end up finding this really unique moment. And so there's an event called the Idiot Armada. Has anyone heard of that? It started in San Francisco. So do you know what the Iditarod is? Right. So the Iditarod is sleds with dogs, and the Iditarod is shopping carts with people. And instead of Alaska, it's New York City or San Francisco. And so it's a race. Everyone has a team and their costume, and you have to have enough dogs in your team to pull your shopping cart. And it has all sorts of sabotage, and there was food throwing for a couple years until they had to ban it. And it's just one of those like total weirdo chaos, but also make art for it. Like everyone has costumes, and like there was one year I remember someone literally put a giant cast iron stove in a shopping cart and was running, like burning wood to keep, because it's always in February, and was burning wood to keep warm, and was also like, you know. But it's, you know, so it's not necessarily about being the fastest, it's more about having the most fun. And that was one of the moments at the end of the race. Someone had taken their cart and chucked it on a fence, and a costume person was just going by, and you're just, oh, you know. But this is also an Iditarod, or Iditarod, where you just have someone in a giant Lego head running down the street for no reason. The other question is, I have been asked that a fair bit, and I have an answer that's very honest, but it's slightly a cop-out, which is when I feel like I want to live somewhere else, then that is when I will live somewhere else. You know, like I said, I have a lot of friends that leave the city because it's too hectic, it's too expensive, it's too hard, and these are all very true. It's just like, for me, it's worth it, but I understand that like that can change. But at the same time, maybe it never will, you know? But at this point, like, it's just so fascinating to me. Like still, you know, like go back. I leave every 6 months to get a breather, you know, get a minute out of the city. Otherwise it does start to crush you. But the nice thing I like is even now when I go back, I'm excited. It's like, yeah, you know, there's gonna be crazy stuff going on, I'm back. So yeah, that hasn't faded at all. And so I feel like as long as that's the case, I'm probably gonna stick it out. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah?
Something you touched on earlier, when I discuss photography with people, I often insist that one needs to be more than just a photographer. And you touched on like, you know, like a raft handler, or like, can you touch on some of the things that you've done or how you identify other than photographer that allows you to find yourself in the situation to create or to get the images that you want?
Sure. Well, I mean, I feel like there's kind of two aspects. Like this shot is a good example of I'm just a photographer, and I just happen to be observing and happen to have a camera. Like I was going home one night, this is on the Bowery, that's it. So I feel like you can just be a photographer and have access to the external world on a, you know, on a certain level, but it kind of puts a cap.
Absolutely. Well,
right.
To find yourself in the situations where your work becomes unique and your vision becomes yours, or the like Nan Golden, you know, that you've referenced her as well. Super specific about what what situation she finds herself in and what she surrounds herself with, you know, and how she self-identifies beyond just photographer. Okay. Kind of asking where you find yourself.
Well, I mean, for me, it's like I feel like there's more to life than being a photographer. There's more than just being a street photographer or whatever. And so, like a lot of the shows that I shoot, I went to shows forever and never took photos, but that was what I wanted to do. When I was growing up, you know, as soon as I hit high school, I was going to punk shows all the time. And like, but I wasn't shooting it. Like that was just what I did. That was just the community that I eventually found myself in and stuff like that. So a lot of the other things are just, this is what I would be doing if I wasn't a photographer. Like my friends want to build a crazy raft, let's go, you know? So some of it is just, this is my life, you know, my friends and what I want to do with my time. It's not, everything is not aiming to get a photo. But then at the same time, because you're a member of the community, you're a contributor, you're helping build or whatever, then you're there. And then you're there later when you're sailing. So it also tends to work out that way as well. But that's what I mean by more than a photographer, an actual contributor, not just like, oh, if I do this thing, then I get this thing. More just like, this is who I am, this is what I want to do with my time.
We're
yeah.
saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I guess like what I'm aiming at is like, you know, if you were to self-identify beyond just photographer, the other things that you've done to kind of find yourself in the situation to get that shot, or like the shot of the guys hugging the fireman where he looks totally stoned. Free candy, kids welcome. You know, like where did you find, how do you like self-identify to find yourself with this particular kind of vision beyond photography?
I thought I understood your question and then I got confused at the end. Well, I mean, like, you know, like with the rafts, like I build the rafts, I actually drive the boats. With bands, like I start off shooting them so they have press photos and then I'm on the road with them touring. And that's why there's the little goth guy hugging the firefighter to show where someone set off the smoke alarm by accident, you know. So my role changes, but it's always, I choose things that I can do. You know, there's no point in being like, I'll do that and then doing a terrible job. When I first went to school, I actually studied sculpture. And I made a living as a really long time as an art assistant, doing mostly carpentry. So it's like, you know, I have those skills, so let me use those skills. You know, don't have me work on your car, but I'll totally help build things out of wood. And you know, being a roadie is just, you just kind of learn on the fly. So I guess, you know, there's a lot of different hats you end up wearing based on what you're interested in. If I don't want to shoot bands, I don't have to be a roadie. But yeah, I don't know. I think that answered your question.
The boiled down is almost like, you know, it's a, you know, be interested in what you're interested in, and that your work, you know, as a photographer kind of flows through that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for example, the artist Swoon and I and another friend started an organization called Combat Shelter after the earthquake in Haiti, where we decided we wanted to try to figure out how to help, but we were all artists, what can we do? And we realized we could learn earth bag building and then take it down there to help teach people to use that because it was very well suited to the environment. And then also train people in it. So in that regard, you know, I did organizing, I did, you know, when we were down there, I was logistics, I did all the web, did all the communication, did fundraising till I lost my eyesight. So a lot of times just identifying what needs to be done and who's around to do it, and then just filling in the gaps as best you can. But, you know, it's also like someone else I know is much better at earth bag building, so I'm not going to, you know, try and do that. But yeah, it depends on the project. Sometimes things come up and you have to do 3 things and hope you're good enough. Yeah.
Was that Swoon on the raft?
On the canoe? Yeah.
With the curly hair?
Yes. Yeah. 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 Cool. Well, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. I have books for sale, and if you have any more questions, I'm going to be right here. Cool. Thanks.